right, and here we are again live on the Lead with Data podcast. I've got a fantastic episode I've been very excited for a while, and Kurt is here to join me. We're talking about a theory, a technique, a set of tools, if you will. I don't know how you'd categorize it, Kurt, but something called Adaption-Innovation theory, and how that can help people be better problem solvers. So really great content, and maybe you could take a moment and introduce yourself, Kurt.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is, I've also been looking forward to this conversation. Dr. Kurt Friedel here at Virginia Tech, and I am the lead director for the Center for Cooperative Problem Solving. And our goal and mission is to advance the teaching and research and outreach of adaptation-innovation theory. And I guess I can just explain more about the theory.
Yeah, please do.
What's really great about it is, Dr. Kirton developed it in 1976, although he spent about 14 years working on it. And it is a theory designed around problem solving and how people work together during the problem-solving process. And so he categorizes people on a continuum between adaptation and innovation. So you might be more adaptive or more innovative. It connects an aspect of our personality to how we prefer to solve problems. And so there's a lot of inventories out there, I'll say. Some of them are amazing. But most of them focus on, if I know myself better, I can become a better person, better leader. I can learn more about myself, which is great. But we can do something that's a little bit more unique, which is if I know your problem-solving style and I know my problem-solving style, I can predict how we work together and engage in change together. And so to give you a little bit of the construct, so it's a continuum, ranging from adaptation to innovation. People who are more adaptive are people who have fewer ideas, but those ideas are true, tried, tested ideas that work all the time. They tend to be focused more inside the box. If the system isn't working, if we apply systems thinking here, they'd prefer to tweak the system to make it working again. So focus on efficiency, evolutionary steps. The more innovative tend to think outside the box, not necessarily because they're focused outside the box. They don't always recognize there being a box. And so they have inside the box ideas, outside the box of ideas, a little bit more random. They carry in a philosophy that is, I have to have a lot of bad ideas before I come up with a really good one, right? Like they love the brainstorming process. So they focus on swapping out the system often, and prefer revolutionary change. Let's swap out the system right now and start something fresh. And so what we know, tying this all to the science of teams and data, is if we have a 20-point gap between two people, we start seeing conflict and even lack of communication or poor communication, poor working together, and even lacking of trust of each other.
Now, you said a 20-point gap. What does that look like?
Yeah, so the continuum theoretically runs between 32 and 160. If you score to the left of 95, you're more adaptive. The mean is at 95. If you score right of 95 to 160, you're more innovative. And it's a true normal distribution. So the closer you get to the ends of the continuum, the more strongly your preference is. This preference that we measure is an aspect of personality. The KAI is in 7 different languages. It cuts across culture, experience, ethnicity, age. We don't see KAI scores changing as people get older. It's a stable construct. It's independent of situation and environment. Although situation and environment play a big part of the problem-solving process, but your preference doesn't change. Anyone can operate outside their style, and we can keep building on the layers here of the complexity of the theory. But anyone can operate outside their style with proper motivation, with proper awareness, and reason to solve the problem in that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That makes me think immediately back in college. I did a whole bunch of different programs and was involved in a bunch of different things where people wanted us to take like personality tests, right? And one of the ones that sticks out in my brain is the DISC profile, right? And what I remember from that is they always wanted me to focus in on a very particular environment or circumstance, because if I placed myself in different environments and circumstances, my results would probably change. So what you're saying is with the KAI approach, the results are a little bit more. I don't know if stable is the right word, but they don't necessarily vary as much when you change between different environments.
And that's a great point. If you're using different psychometric inventories like DISC, Myers-Briggs, strengths, what have you, it's really important to know the theory that braces those or underpins the inventory. And what the theory does is it designs what the instrument's measuring and how to use that information. And so, DISC integrates situation, culture, along with your behavior. So if I'm taking the DISC, I may get a different result if I'm completing it in Germany, if I'm completing it in the United States, and so on. KAI is measuring something as an aspect of personality. It's innate. Dr. Kirton believed that it was likely genetic, or is likely genetic. We don't have the evidence to prove that yet, but that was a firm belief of his.
Very interesting. Now, this isn't just a theory that you all are studying. You have a center that you're applying this to a wide variety of maybe industries or other domains. Where are you seeing this used?
Yeah, we are seeing it used heavily, of course, in the consulting industry. People who are in firms and using it in top 100, top 500 companies, a lot of executive coaching, and smaller companies. We've seen several startups with a focus on smaller companies, less than 20 people. We see it heavily used in the military, Air Force, Marines, and Navy SEALs, Special Operations, Strategic Command. And the third group is actually academics, because it's a strong measure, psychologically robust. It's used heavily in research, mostly in engineering education, but also leadership.
Very cool. Yeah, one of the things that's popping in my brain when you were describing the more, you said adaptive versus innovative personalities or approaches of going at this on the spectrum is I'm just thinking of somebody working with data, building up a model, and maybe that turns into somebody's preference on the adaptive side, where you're going to spend a little bit more time fine-tuning your parameters or doing some additional feature selection. You're using the existing model, the existing framework to try to make improvements to your problem, whereas someone more on the innovative side might say, hey, let's go and try this brand new model that I've heard about, or just change the infrastructure completely and see if we can either simplify it or probably more likely make things more complex, or at least that's the nature that I've seen from people who want to try something different at all. It tends to go towards complexity instead of simplicity. Right. I don't know. Is that a trend that you see within that sort of spectrum there?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily equate simplicity and complexity with adaptation-innovation. Those are two different things.
Okay.
To me, simplicity and complexity would be a measure of level or intelligence or capacity in that vein. If I'm moving from simple to complex, it's something that's becoming more sophisticated, and that would be independent of KAI. And we do have to be a little bit careful here with the terminology, because we are defining innovation differently.
Okay.
Popularly speaking, when people say innovation, they're referring to a new process, new technique, new technology, something new. And what we're saying is this is a style that is independent of new. So we can have adaptive new ideas as well as innovative new ideas. We can have adaptive original ideas as well as innovative original ideas. And so some great examples, the light bulb was a perfect combination of Edison being more adaptive to put together. I often think of other inventions that, we've known about them for a long time, but someone was able to originally put them together in a unique way that makes them work well. That's adaptive creativity that we need to also recognize. So what Kirton has actually done is shared that when people talk about innovation, about half the time they get it right. But we need to understand there's two types of new. There's the adaptive new, which is tweaking that can create great change. Another great example of this is Amazon, which is just a bookstore that grew online and amazingly so by Jeff Bezos. People don't usually think of Jeff Bezos as innovative, popularly speaking, although he might have an article about innovation. We would say that's a misuse of the word. But going back to your point, what we often see is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. So let's say you have a company, and maybe it's the hiring committee, or maybe it's the board saying, "Hey," they recognize a bit of it, but they don't have the term. So we're saying, "Well, we have a really adaptive individual here," not knowing the terms, but so maybe we need to hire someone who's more innovative, and they get sort of a loose cannon. But it has great ideas. But we start seeing that pendulum swing back and forth, maybe too much, or maybe they got upset with the loose cannon, so they hire someone who's more adaptive, and maybe they're a little bit slow to move in the necessary needs of the company to revolutionize certain things. Things get a little stale.
Yeah. So that further description about what you're defining innovation as, and that being present on both sides of the spectrums, pieced quite a bit together in my brain in a very short time. So thank you for that. One of the things that's making me think of is a previous topic that we've had on this show is about business model innovation. And one of my favorite things about that is you don't have to come up with a completely new business model that nobody's ever thought of before. There's actually almost like a limited set of business models that every business has, like some combination of these two or three, or slight tweaks to like archetypes that are out there. And when I've worked with businesses on business model innovation, there's kind of two ways to approach that recombining thing, the recombination of business models. And one is to say, let's look at the combinations that are within our industry and see if we can do a recombination that somebody else in our industry is currently doing. And that's probably more on the adaptive side of staying more like within the box and not like breaking totally free of what's already out there, but making tweaks to the business in an innovative way that would be very innovative to the business, even though they're maybe smaller tweaks, right?
Yeah.
The other way of using those business model archetypes would be to say, let's just open up the doors wide open and use every single possible business model in consideration. So if I've got a SaaS business, software as a service, how might that get paired up with, say, a performance-based business model where you don't pay per use, you don't pay for a subscription, you pay for the performance of the product. I don't see a lot of SaaS businesses out there. It's probably very using that sort of approach, but who knows? Maybe that's that more innovation style is just breaking free of the industry norms using these business model archetypes.
Yeah. Several thoughts going through my head. The one is, there tends to be a more adaptive approach winning right now. Is as a company, we're going to sell one thing, and we're going to sell that one thing incredibly well. Five Guys, we do burgers, I'm trying, Ben and Jerry's, we do ice cream, and we do it incredibly well. We have a lot of different variations of that ice cream. but I do think if you're opening up beyond that, one thing we can do is look at products and services that a company may offer, and one technique that you could use with utilizing the adaptation innovation continuum is saying, okay, let's put all of our products on a grid, and let's put value added products at the top end on a vertical continuum, and more of the cost-effective products on the bottom on that vertical continuum. And then on the horizontal continuum, put adaptation and innovation. And you can start mapping, are these adaptive high-end products or adaptive low-end products, innovative high-end products, innovative low-end products. And, you might start looking at that and just decide, do you want more products in a different quadrant because that quadrant is missing, or do you want to focus, this is our quadrant and this is where we're staying?
And depending on the composition of your team, you'd probably lean one way or the other, right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and that's making me think of there was I forget the terms exactly, but in some of the business classes I took in the past, they were describing that the makeup of your team, like the structure of your team, fits essentially the structure of your product, right? So if you have, say, this autonomous vehicle technology, usually there's like a core development team that does a lot of the algorithms work, and then you've got application teams that are fine-tuning that core work for particular customers and regions and stuff. So you've got like that core backbone with application teams on the side. And so your product starts looking like a core offering that gets adapted for a customer versus something that's more like WordPress, where, well, I guess that's also kind of backbone. But so all that to say, if your products tend to look more on the adaptive side of things, that might even be an indication that your team is adaptive. Or if you're struggling between getting products out there that are supposedly innovative for your company, but it doesn't fit the innovation style of your team, it's probably an indicator that you're trying to innovate in a way that your team isn't going to be able to execute on effectively.
Yeah, innovators are really good at prototypes. Let's get the thing working as fast as we can, and then they're off to the next thing. Adapters are very good at the details and the efficiencies of the systems of the thing that you're working at. But I'll say, when we put teams together, even as decentralized as companies are right now, we really have difficulty saying, hey, you're a bit too innovative on the average. We need a couple good adapters in the team. That doesn't work too well all the time because people tend to be brought in a company because of their experience and their expertise, their skill sets. So those are two independent things. We have style, but then the learned skill sets is what people bring into the team, and people sometimes don't get along with that team, and that might be because of a different style, not because of the skill set. So what we do with KAI is say, well, listen, there's a reason this person isn't getting along here. Is because of the style, possibly. It could be other things. And maybe he's offering or she's offering the most diversity to the team, and you need to listen to them because they have a great perspective that you haven't considered before. And if we don't have that diversity, often it's, teams are put together and they're a little bit homogenous, and we need to say, well, it doesn't make sense for you to bring in a more innovative person or more adaptive person, but what we need here is to reconsider your preference and your bias for innovation or adaptation, and think to yourself, well, okay, we have this great idea, we're working well. How do we get the rest of the company to buy in? Because if the rest of the company can't buy in, we're wasting our time.
Yeah. So I imagine the ideal is if you are aware of this approach, right, as you're building your team from the ground up, and you can like almost engineer the team that you need, right? But the reality is anybody who's coming across this for the first time is often already has their team, right? And they get this inventory of who's on their team. And then you mentioned, sort of a 20-point gap potentially causing, uh, you know, difficulty in collaboration or things of that nature. How do businesses who already have a team put together, who go through an inventory like this, start resolving that sort of team cohesion then?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Project Google, or sorry, Google's Project Aristotle. I said that wrong.
Okay.
Which you can Google and find out more about. But at the heart of what they found of effective teams was you need a safe space to share ideas, and those ideas shared around the table are not judged on necessarily the merit, or excuse me, judged on the person who gave the idea, but judged solely on the merit of the idea. And that's incredibly helpful. It's important to know that, again, we need to think of diversity of thinking, how everyone's contributing, and having mutual respect for everyone in that process. Because we call KAI non-pejorative, meaning there's no better style. So there's no one here is better than the other one. We don't have any second-class citizenry on the team. So let's all share and be open and have good ideas together, managing each other's diversity, but that hinges on mutual respect. So if I respect you and you respect me in the problem-solving process, that gap can be bridged through good coping behavior and working together. Also, a bit of humility, recognizing that I have limits and you have limits. So I need to have mutual respect for your limits, and I need to have humility to recognize my limits.
Yeah, now you used the word bridge, and I think you had mentioned that previously when we talked before about, there's these behaviors that we can have to help bridge those sort of large gaps in this index, but people can often serve as a bridge as well, right?
Yeah. So anyone can cope, as we call it, coping behavior outside of their preferred style. So anyone can be more adaptive or more innovative through behavior operating outside their preferred style. But sometimes it's very difficult. I could be out of motive. I have no more motive left to cope with you, or the gap is so wide that I can't, as an innovator, provide any more detail for you, or as an adapter, open up the box anymore to let you in. But what we could do is find someone who has a score, oftentimes in the middle, although that's by chance often. But normally it's a person who has good mediation skills, good facilitation skills, that can navigate the waters to communicate with the both of us and get us to work together better.
So that's not always somebody, or at least almost always somebody who scores in between those two that are able to perform that function.
Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion in the literature about that. So to clear that up, by chance, you tend to be in the middle, but it does not have to be a person in the middle. So any KAI score can be a bridger. Sometimes it's the most innovative person in the room, recognizing the need to, two people need to get along, so they step in the middle and operate in that way. Or it could be the most adaptive person in the room, saying, "Hey, these 2 or 3 people need to get along for the focus of solving problem A," and they step in the middle to communicate with the group.
That's right. You mentioned problem A, and I don't think we've mentioned that so far on this show, but we had talked about it previously. So what is problem A?
So problem A is the task at hand, and this is an aspect of adaptation-innovation theory. The reason the group comes together is a shared sense of wanting to solve problem A. I was trying to think of which way to go here. Problem B then would be, as loosely defined, any distraction from problem A. So this is connecting everything to leadership and working together. Problem B is typically related to our diversity. I bring diversity to the table. You bring diversity to the table. If we're trying to work together just by being in the room, I'm creating a problem B. We can work on solving problem A, but problem Bs are always going to happen. So the goal of leadership is to mitigate problem Bs as a team working together to focus on problem A, but also recognizing when problem Bs do come up that are significant, we need to work together to resolve that, mitigate that, so we can continue to focus on problem A. And so in industry and business, typically problem A is the mission of the organization or the product or service being developed.
Yeah. Now, since we're talking about innovation, not the side of the spectrum of innovative versus adaptive, but just innovation in general, does a problem B ever become a problem A for an organization?
Yeah. A great
or should it?
Yeah. It can. And so I'll say this. So problem Bs tend to be the ones who, let's say, when you solve problem A, there's a reward. And the reward of solving problem A gives us more motive for focusing on problem A. Anytime we have a problem B, there's stress. And so if the reward is greater than the stress of working together, we achieve solving problem A. If the stress of problem B is greater than problem A and the reward of solution A, we don't commonly succeed well. And so sometimes people are not getting their fair reward, what was agreed upon. And so that is a significant problem B, and the leader's job is to make sure that doesn't happen. And sometimes, we'll just leave it at that. So yeah, the problem B is an issue in getting in the way of problem A.
Yeah, so businesses have a problem A that is almost like an indefinite in time. Like you will always be working on problem A, right? Because as you said, it's your mission statement or something of that nature.
Yeah.
And so as you're tackling those problem A's, the group, the team is getting the rewards of those, whether that's skills development, compensation, other equity, just the if you're not doing it in just a business context, but maybe more of a nonprofit context, changing things in the world, like all those sort of rewards are being contrasted against the distractions, which maybe can be rewarding in and of themselves, which is why maybe some of these distractions stick around long enough. But what you're defining as the problem Bs are the things that maybe cause more discord in the team, or just because of diversity of thought, you have what you were saying are distractions where there's wasted effort and things of that nature, where somebody has an idea that doesn't end up getting pursued, and that's viewed as more of like a penalty to them of like, man, we're not even considering my idea or something of that nature, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. And so for, you had asked, is sometimes the goal of an individual or group is their problem A is really the problem B. Yeah, that would be HR. HR's role is to help mitigate problem Bs. I'd also say leadership consultants, business consultants their main goal is to resolve problem Bs. Oftentimes when a company hires a consultant, they know what problem A is. They need help resolving the problem Bs.
So you've done some work with businesses on the consulting side. When you've described that to groups, is there like clarity that comes around what the role of the consultant is? Because I hadn't heard the problem that a consultant solves framed that way, and it was just really interesting to me if that's something that you see in a lot of other consultants where that's almost a new way of looking at their role.
It's a fresh perspective from KAI in that way, that problem A is what the company does. And if they were really good at it, they wouldn't need the consultant necessarily, would they? But what they really need, of course, there's technical experts and people who do engineering that you need to be brought in, but I'm talking about the The people who focus on problem B are the consultants who focus on strategy and process. So let's say we're in a team together, and I have a couple of choices as an individual if I want to work with you or not to focus on problem A. I can choose to collaborate with you, meaning I have a shared sense of problem A, and want to work with you. I could ignore you because you're not useful to me right now, and I'm not sure if I even like you. But I could consider that you're completely wrong and I'm right, and I'm going to compete against you. I'm going to do my own thing on my own way, and I might come back or I might not. And so when we're talking about business consultants with process of working together and strategies of the problem-solving process and engaging in change, those consultants are focused on problem Bs.
All right. Now, if you don't mind, if I change the course of the conversation a little bit, because you've got such a fascinating story on how you ended up, studying the adaptive innovation theory from Kirton, and would you mind telling just a little bit about where you started? I think you were mentioning you started off as a high school teacher, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, I was a high school teacher in a small town called Laurel, Nebraska. I taught high school agriculture and FFA, if you don't know, is Future Farmers of America. And I taught for 4 years. And what I recognized was in my classes, for whatever reason, my students seemed to be creative. And I was really interested in that. And I didn't know if it was something I was doing or the students I was attracting. And I was working for a national curriculum project, and one of my supervisors happened to be a professor who was also interested in creativity. He convinced me to go to graduate school. And so my PhD was really focused at first on creativity. And I had a committee member who said, well, you're asking the wrong question, of course. And
that had to feel good to hear.
Yeah, right. And he said, you shouldn't be concerned about how creative people are. You should be more concerned about how people are creative. And he was certified in KAI and had me meet Dr. Kirton. And I was still interested in the field of education. So we were still talking about teacher and student dynamics. And so what we did is we designed a different study. Not focused on how creative someone can be, because that's a measure of capacity, strongly correlated with intelligence. And this is creative style, which is how someone might be creative. And we used the KAI, and we looked at 9 different classes, and we were very detailed in saying, okay, we need so many adaptive instructors at this college campus, so many innovative instructors, and so many people in the middle. And we looked at classes of 50 students, and we measured KAI gap. So if we had an innovative instructor, we were interested in adaptive students. And likewise, if we had an adaptive instructor, we were interested in innovative students. And the 20-point gap threshold that we started to see issues. And so what we found was really fascinating. To make the long story short, problem A and problem B was applying to the classroom. And so if the main goal or purpose of the classroom, their problem A is learning, what is a teacher doing to promote learning? And so some classrooms, what we found is the bigger the cognitive gap between teacher and student, the more motivation we found, meaning they were bridging the gap. They were more motivated to do things, engage in learning strategies for the purpose of solving problem A. But in the other half of classes, really, the bigger the gap, the more stress we found. And we had a very global view of stress, but it was measuring stress. So the bigger the gap between teacher and student, we were seeing bigger stress. And we weren't able to do it, but Dr. Kirton's advice to me was go back and interview those teachers who were doing it well, where you had bigger motivation, the bigger the stress, bigger motivation for bigger the gap. And and ask them, what are you doing to promote good learning? Because that would be really useful. We never did that, but it was the first aha moment for me that this conception of problem A and problem B really expands beyond leadership, but almost everything from marriage counseling to anytime a team comes together, it applies.
That's fascinating. And who would have thought, probably when you started out in your high school teaching position, that you would end up where you are today, right?
Right. Yeah. I had no idea. No idea.
So where would you place yourself on that adaptive and innovative spectrum there?
So I do tend to be more innovative. Yeah. And what's really great about it is now I can define it. I know it's not related to intelligence. As a researcher, I have to be very detail oriented, and when I do make a mistake, it frustrates me. But then I also recognize that maybe I need more motive, maybe I need more sleep. I need to figure out how to better cope to handle those things.
Yeah, has there been like identified like coping mechanisms, if you will, that work well on either side of the spectrum or both?
Yeah. That's some of the new research we're looking at is what do people do so if it's let's just back up and say if this is a true problem solving theory and I have a particular style in solving problem A, the same style applies to how I manage problem B's, right? And so what are the go-to coping mechanisms that the more adaptive or the more innovative see? And we have some ideas, but we need the research to really back it up.
That's interesting. Yeah, I got very curious there because I've noticed myself whenever I get stressed, there's probably one of two things that I do. Number one is I start a whole bunch of projects, like just little projects that I've been thinking about for years, and I'll like restart them or, try to do it a different way until eventually I realize what I'm doing. And then I go, oh, I got to put those projects away because those are the problem Bs, right?
Yeah.
Not the problem A that I'm trying to deal with. Or I guess the other thing I do is, well, I guess it's still kind of in the project nature. It turns into like doing the whole to-do list thing and trying to come up with some grand scheme on which I'm going to organize my life again, right? Yeah. So I don't know if those sound like the same side of the spectrum to you, but
yeah, and everyone's so unique and different, so it's what works for you. We did do a Navy SEAL study. We interviewed some Navy SEALs and we asked adaptive Navy SEALs and innovative Navy SEALs, and Laura McIntyre, who was working with them, collected the data as part of her dissertation that we're going to publish. And she actually looked at, and I don't remember all of them offhand, but there were some differences between how the more adaptive and the more innovative operate to be more resilient. That was the dependent variable we were looking at, is resiliency and how are Navy SEALs resilient. And but for me, the big takeaway was how adapters and innovators see the world. When the more adaptive felt more resilient, it was because they recognized what the environment was and believed that they could control themselves to the greatest efficiency within that environment. So they gained power and control from the environment. The more innovative, on the other hand, recognized they could change the environment. And so they gained resiliency from recognizing, well, some of these things are just a little bit more situational, less stable. Well, let's, how do we work around this? And that's how they were resilient. So, we're really getting into very complex behaviors. When we start talking about stress, and is stress a motivating factor or a debilitating factor? And how do we cope? And what's great about it is, we're just bringing in one more variable out of the complexity of the human brain and just saying we have this innate, stable characteristic of our personality, of how we solve problems, and how does that change things up?
Yeah, I love that example you just gave because that to me that demonstrates sort of like the power of what could be achieved with understanding these types of things, right? Like if you're in a bad situation, as I'm sure Navy SEALs find themselves in, right?
Yeah.
You need in the immediate term to be able to maximize your performance, your resiliency, no matter what the environment is, right? Like you need that adaptive strength there to, adapt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then if you just only ever adapt to your environment, you're potentially never going to get out of a bad situation if that's what the environment is essentially forcing you to always stay within. So you also need to be able to have the strength on the innovative side to change that environment and find a really good, I don't know if it's a lockstep approach or some method of being some other people in innovation call ambidextrous, right? Leveraging
Yeah.
both sides of those of that spectrum. That would be game changing, whether you're a Navy SEAL, a business, your personal life, all kinds of stuff. So, wow,
Yeah.
I'm really glad you gave that example. That pieced some things together for me.
Yeah, yeah, and then again, so there's no better style, but you can see if you have a high functioning team like Navy SEALs, and we have a 20-point gap because you're trying to change the environment and you're trying to get control from the environment, we can see where the conflict is, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
so it's helping them recognize that and recognize, okay, I might be wrong here. Maybe the best thing to do is change the environment, and I need permission to do that. Or the better thing to do is to stay within the environment, and I need to be aware of that, and getting these high functioning teams recognizing their preferences and working with each other, and this isn't related to intelligence, or motive or values. So it's like, well, there goes Larry again, changing the environment. It's not it's not related to his intelligence, and that helps build the mutual respect because I recognize he could be smarter than me, more motivated than me, have more values related to Navy SEALs than me, um, but we just disagree because of our problem-solving style.
Mm, very interesting. Yeah. Well, we're hitting our 40-minute-ish mark, and so I'm wondering, I've got one more question for you before we kind of wrap things up here. Where is a place that you've seen this applied that surprised you the most?
Hmm. So I'll share. It's a study I'm actually working on now with a master's student. Um, hmm. Interestingly enough, and she's getting ready to defend here soon, and we're going to make a case study of it. So it's a women's basketball team, and this women's basketball team was set up before COVID, probably to be a championship team, at least make it to the Final Four. Like that was a prediction. And what we found after we gave the starters to KAI was it was a very homogenous team. Everyone was within 10 points. And which means everyone's thinking the same. And there's little room for conflict because we're all thinking the same. And so that just raised so many questions with athletics as the first time we've applied KAI to athletics is, so do coaches sort of inherently, the great coaches inherently see this? Like, okay, these people, if I'm trying to figure out who my next starter is, or is it a process of trial and error? Because homogeneous teams are rare. Normally, if I give the KAI to a group, I still will see a 20, 30 point spread normally, if not, larger, sometimes 60, 70, 80 point spreads. But if it's a self-selected group, meaning they volunteered to be in, or someone particularly picked them for a particular reason, then all bets are off, and we might see a more adaptive team or more innovative team or somewhere in the middle. But for whatever reason, this was a very homogeneous team. I've never seen a team of 5 within 10 points of each other. And what we normally say is, well, so you get along really well, but who are you ignoring? Because everyone's an outsider to them, right? So we're able to use KAI to define in groups and out groups, and everyone's an outsider to them because they think the best, because everyone thinks like me, right?
This is the way it's done, right?
This is the way, you're right. So and of course I'm tongue in cheek here a little bit,
Right.
but that was really fascinating. So we're gonna print this out in the near future.
Very cool. Well, when you do, please let me know. I'd be very interested to read that. In part because my wife and I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but other people who have listened to the show before know that I have a side gig, if you will, where my wife and we own a professional ballet company. And so we're regularly working with, smaller teams of 5 to 12 people, dancers, to put together a performance. And there's a lot of equivalencies between a ballet performance and an athletic performance as well. So yeah, I'd just be really interested to see if there's any parallels I can draw from that.
That'd be cool.
Is there any link or something that I can make sure I put on social media here for people who are more interested in finding more information about this stuff?
Yeah, the better link to go to would be kaicenter.com, and both it's in the UK or United Kingdom, so center spelled with a CENTRE, but both will work if you spell it center the US way, but kaicenter.com.
All right, I just sent that to you on private chat before I send it out to the normal comments. Okay, so I will add that to all of the platforms here that I can, so people have that. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about the topic that Kurt has been studying for a long time now, we've got the link out there for you. Feel free to put comments below on this post, and I'm sure Kurt and I will be watching those over the next few days, should they come in. And thank you so much for bringing this very, very interesting topic to the show, Kurt.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, if you'll just hang on one moment, I'm going to close down the live stream and we can debrief.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Take care.